This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South Africa's Ramaphosa urges rich countries to stop hoarding COVID-19 vaccines. Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for global cooperation in his address at the Davos Forum. And business leaders in Zimbabwe pledge to finance the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines amid soaring coronavirus cases. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at other stories coming up this hour. In business, Africa receives $38 billion worth of foreign direct investments in 2020. And in sports, Mali through to the knockout stages of the African Nations Championship that is currently ongoing in Cameroon. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged wealthy countries to ensure the equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines as the world needed to act together to fight the pandemic. He said this while speaking at a virtual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Ramaphosa, who currently chairs the African Union, said African countries want access to vaccines as quickly as other nations. South Africa's COVID-19 outbreak is the worst on the continent. Nations are currently struggling to secure sufficient vaccines to start countrywide inoculation programs. Let's cross now to CGTN's Angelo Coppola live for us in Johannesburg. Angelo, what more can you tell us about that address by President Ramaphosa?
Well, the key points that he did make were the ones that you just stressed now in terms of the nationalism about. He discussed it in his Q&A session straight after his speech, and he talked about some countries in the Western world hoarding up to 4 times the number of vaccines they needed to feed or to help their populations. In fact, he did say, he also called for some kind of financial relief. So he's not only asking for those people who are hoarding to release the vaccine, but also asking for some form of remuneration or discounting. They're prepared to pay for it, Ramaphosa says, but not at full rate. So that was one of the key messages that came across today. Then there was also talk around South Africa's economy and the fact that they're on the road to recovery. Then there was mention of the African Free Trade Area, where he focused on the fact that there's 1.2 million potential consumers that the rest of the world should be looking at and listening to, and also let the world know that the African Free Trade Area is going to be a major player when all the countries start trading with each other, and there's free tariff trade between those countries. So some reactions that are already coming through from some of the analysts talking about the vaccine nationalism, which is a key issue, AfTA and its future plans, and generally considered to be a rather moderate speech by the South African president. Peninah?
Okay, Angelo, we appreciate that. Thank you very much for joining us. Angelo Coppola live in Johannesburg. Now, the World Economic Forum's Davos Agenda meeting has begun online. The 5-day event draws leaders, scholars and businessmen from over 70 countries. This year's event is under the theme, A Crucial Year to Rebuild Trust, and Chinese President Xi Jinping has addressed the event via video link, calling for global efforts to uphold multilateralism and cooperation to address common problems. CGTN's Zheng Yibing has this report.
The world comes together at a dialogue meeting to discuss solutions to global challenges under the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. The founder of the World Economic Forum called for immediate action.
I believe this is the best time to reset our policies and to work jointly for a peaceful and prosperous world.
Chinese President Xi Jinping shared his sentiment in his special address, calling for global action, response, and cooperation to face challenges as the world goes through what some experts have called the worst recession since the end of the Second World War.
The problems facing the world are intricate and complex. The way out of them is through upholding multilateralism and building a community with a shared future for mankind.
They called upon countries to step up coordination in macroeconomic policies, abandon ideological prejudices, and follow the path of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefits. He said public health emergencies like COVID-19 may very well recur, and global problems have to be solved with unity and consultation instead of confrontation.
To build small circles or start a new Cold War, to reject, threaten, or intimidate others, to willfully impose decoupling, supply disruption, or sanctions, and to create isolation or estrangement will only push the world into division and even confrontation. We cannot tackle common challenges in a divided world, and confrontation will lead us to a dead end.
Xi attaches great importance to the international system centered around the United Nations, as well as global order based on international law. He stressed that the world needs to give full play to the role of the World Health Organization. He also called for reforms to the World Trade Organization and the global financial system. He urged parties to deliver on the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change and promote green development. And Xi reiterated China's commitment to the world.
We will follow a new development philosophy and foster a new development paradigm, with domestic circulation as the mainstay and domestic and international circulations reinforcing each other.
He said China will continue to implement the win-win strategy of opening up its economy to bring more opportunities to other countries and give impetus to global economic recovery and growth. Experts say 2021 will be the crucial year and hope that all sides involved in the conference can work together to rebuild trust, boost cooperation, pool ideas, and contribute to the resolution of global issues. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Reactions are coming in following Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech at the World Economic Forum. Nigerian scholar Nazifi Abdullahi Darma says the speech was sobering in a time when the ripple effects of the pandemic can be felt everywhere.
What I'm most impressed about the speech is his statement that the most pressing task for the international community is containment of the virus. Because the reality is that this pandemic is not just a health crisis, but it's also an economic catastrophe. Because of trade interconnectedness, if there is negative economic slump in one region or one country, and especially if it is a major economy, the negative repercussions and multiply effects will vibrate to all other countries and regions of the world. And therefore, working as a team, irrespective of ideological connotation and location, is very important.
Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa is due to meet business leaders who have promised to finance the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines. Russia and China want to supply the vaccines. Zimbabwe is also in contact with WHO's COVAX scheme, which is due to roll out next month. Authorities in the impoverished Southern African nation are scrambling to contain the accelerating spread of the coronavirus. Infections have doubled in just the past few weeks, while 4 cabinet ministers and dozens of officials have died from the virus. Still in Zimbabwe, public services have been paralyzed. This comes as government ordered a near shutdown of operations to minimize the spread of COVID-19 amid a spike in infections. The country is on a tight lockdown, which was imposed in early January. The government has ordered that only 10% of its employees should report for work. Officials are only attending to emergencies such as issuing of burial orders. Zimbabwe, like many other African countries, initially recorded low numbers of COVID-19, but has recently experienced a spike in cases. There are fears that a new, more infectious variant of the virus came to the country when scores of Zimbabweans living in South Africa returned home for the holiday season.
We are facing a lot of challenges here, and we are spending at least 2 hours to several hours waiting just to get assistance. The more we get crowded here without assistance, the more we get infected with this deadly virus.
With the current problem where there's virtual shutdown of the government due to COVID-19, we are now forced to work online from home. And it's unfortunate that there are no proper systems, because with the coming in of COVID, number one thing that was supposed to be done, especially by government, considering that is the largest regulator and also, enabler of critical functions of our society, critical functions of our nation. They were supposed to go online on most services.
Traditional leaders in South Africa are calling for a revision of government regulations regarding the burials of people who died from COVID-19. Funeral parlors currently cannot allow families to view bodies at mortuaries, breaking a centuries-old tradition. CGTN's Ulisa Njamila has more.
Based on the current COVID-19 rules and regulations, bereaved families are not allowed to view the bodies of their loved ones before burial. And the bodies of those who lost their lives to the virus are covered in plastic. Bathing and dressing up deceased loved ones are some of the most integral parts of grieving in many cultures here in South Africa. And so the COVID-19 rules and regulations in regards to funerals have left many quite unsettled. And so the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, or CONTRALESA, wants to help them by ensuring that the current rules and regulations in regards to funerals are changed.
It must be reviewed because the issue of the plastic must be done away with completely, because it contradicts the cultural framework. Even before there was the outbreak of the coronavirus, people disassociate with plastic completely. Even if the coffin is laced with plastic, our people in traditional communities always insist that remove the lacing of the plastic, because the body can be buried with the plastic. So we're saying change the plastic, use something else.
We always have a conflict with the families because, as you know, we are in Africa. So as Africans, we've got customs. If a person passes away, there's a rituals we must perform. So we end up fighting because they really want to do their rituals.
There have been widespread reports of families exhuming the bodies of their loved ones after the burial under strict COVID-19 rules. They claim to want to verify if they buried the correct bodies.
Simple thing, there's been mixing of bodies, and people end up burying wrong people instead of their relative, because we can't view the bodies. So that's the reason why.
These exhumations were informed by the fact that people were having nightmares, some having dreams, some, of course, having this feeling and an instinct that the fact that their own people have been buried, wrapped in plastic, it is not in keeping with their culture and tradition.
So far, officials are urging citizens to find new funeral practices in order to help stop the spread of COVID-19. But CONTRALESA believes that there's actually a practical way of solving this.
The family must elect 1 or 2 people, and those people must be equipped with a personal protective staff, so that we tick the boxes and say, okay, they are confirmed that this is the right person.
Discussions between CONTRALESA and funeral parlors are ongoing, and a document calling for changes is expected to be submitted to the government soon. Ulisa Njamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
It's 14 minutes into the hour. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up. Concern over rising insecurity in the Central African Republic. And Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is set to resign, seeking a fresh mandate to run a country struggling to contain the coronavirus.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Syria, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A large group of gunmen have abducted 7 children from an orphanage in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Kidnapping activities have increased across Nigeria in recent years, despite government efforts to tackle it. Our correspondent Philly Haza reports from this city.
The police spokesperson, Miriam Yusuf, says one of the hostages has been rescued already and that the rescue operation is underway to release the rest of them. Miriam did not give much details of the operation or the rescued hostage. The armed suspect stormed the Rachel orphanage home in Abaji at the weekend, kidnapping 7 young orphans and a security guard. According to the police, the attackers forcefully entered the orphanage and whisked away their victims to an unknown location. They also kidnapped 3 other women from the same community afterwards. According to Global Terrorism Index, Nigeria is currently the 3rd most terrorized country in the world. Late last year, more than 300 schoolboys were rescued from kidnappers in Katsina State, the home of President Muhammadu Buhari, which is about 500 kilometers away from Abuja. At the start of this year, President Buhari reiterated his promise to halt the operations of kidnappings across the country by tasking security agencies to intensify their ongoing efforts. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
In the Central African Republic, the government said troops have killed 44 rebels attempting to take the capital, Bangui. The army launched a counter-offensive in Boyali village, about 90 kilometers from the capital. The government says that there were no casualties from their side. Rebel fighters in recent days surrounded the capital to dispute the re-election of President Faustin Archange Touadéra. In December, 6 powerful armed groups joined forces before advancing towards the capital a week before the presidential elections. The attack was averted by the United Nations peacekeepers, CAR troops, as well as Russian and Rwandan reinforcement. Let's now bring in Dr. Hassan Hanenje, the director at the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, to discuss the unfolding situation in the Central African Republic. Dr. Hanenje, disputed elections in the CAR seem to have sparked a rebel offensive, and now hundreds of thousands are said to have fled their homes, and yet not much attention is being given to the situation. Is this a forgotten crisis?
I think the relative quiet by the international community and sometimes international media may create an appearance that this is a forgotten conflict. And in fact, of course, in the wake of what has happened and what is going on around the world, it's easy to conclude that way. But let's remember there's still a robust UN peacekeeping force. There is recently, last week, there was a United Nations Security Council briefing on the situation in Central African Republic. I think what has changed and makes it appear forgotten is that it's not appearing currently high on the agenda of the international community. And in large part because, number one, of course, of the evolving pandemic, but number two, major countries in the world, they're more concerned with their domestic affairs and the kind of political changes that are taking place as opposed to trying to figure out what is happening in Central African Republic. But I don't think the conflict is forgotten. It's just not high on the agenda of the international community at this stage.
And the developments we've seen in the CAR have also thrown into question almost 2 years of peace efforts. Why does lasting peace appear unattainable in the country?
I think a common mistake that sometimes peacemakers make is once you conclude a peace agreement, you expect it to be able to take its own course and be implemented. Critical aspect that lacks is enforcement. And without appropriate mechanisms to ensure compliance to the items and clauses of the peace agreement that was arrived at in a very organic way compared to previous peace agreements in the Central African Republic, is that framework was lacking. Now things became complicated, of course, a year later with the COVID pandemic, and it took away the international community's attention to that peace agreement and to Central African Republic. But without enforcement, I think it's only going to remain an aspirational goal in the years to come. Now, it's about time the international community actually are brought to fore, all the carrots and sticks they may be able to bring to bear to ensure that the parties comply to the terms of the peace agreement and help the Central African Republic transition to peace and stability. In the absence of that, I think it will be a challenge.
Okay. All right. Dr. Hassan Hanenja, thank you very much for joining us. Now, Cote d'Ivoire has paid tribute to its 4 peacekeepers killed in Mali early January. The soldiers were killed in an explosion between the town of Douentza and Timbuktu in northern Mali. Their bodies were repatriated back home on Friday. They are the first Ivorians killed in an external operation. They were part of the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali aimed at restoring order in the country. Mali has been fighting jihadists in the north since 2013. During the solemn ceremony, President Alassane Ouattara and Prime Minister Hamed Bakayo acknowledged their sacrifice, praising the soldiers for their dedication to keep the region safe.
You are heroes for the sacrifice made to a brother country, for having volunteered this mission in Mali, for having been selected among several soldiers to be part of this battalion, for having followed all training modules for 3 years. You have behaved like true peacekeepers since your development in Timbuktu, concerned about the well-being of the population in your area of responsibility. Your comrades in the contingent affirm their determination to continue the mission. Their commitment will not suffer any weakness in remembering you.
The death toll from Storm Eloise has risen to at least 12. This is according to the latest figures from authorities across southeastern Africa. Aerial footage showed land in eastern Mozambique submerged in floodwater. 6 people were killed in Mozambique, the country's National Institute for Disaster Risk Management and Reduction reported. This is after the tropical cyclone made landfall in the central province of Sofala on Saturday. Some residents were seen queuing up on Monday to be evacuated from flooded Buzi, a district of Sofala province. The storm is expected to move towards southwestern Botswana on Tuesday, causing heavy rains.
I'm here in the district of Buzi. I've been suffering because of the floods. We're being evacuated to Guaragwara, but we have been waiting for the boat since the day before yesterday. I've been queuing, but I haven't yet been able to board the boat. When we go, we will have to leave everything behind. We only have the clothes we wear, and we don't have a place to stay. We are not doing good because we are suffering. We've been sleeping on the road under the rain.
Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is set to resign. Conte will hold a cabinet meeting today to inform ministers of his intentions. Local media reports the move is an attempt to build a new government after weeks of political turmoil. Conte survived a parliamentary vote of confidence last week but failed to secure a majority in the Senate, leaving his government severely impaired. Turkey and Greece have held their first face-to-face talks in nearly 5 years after months of tensions over competing claims in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Officials from both sides came together in Istanbul on Monday for renewed discussions. The 2 countries are at odds over several issues, including maritime boundaries and energy rights. Mikhail Bradavid has more from Istanbul.
Following the meeting, Turkey's state-run Anadolu agency announced that Turkish and Greek officials had evaluated previous rounds of talks, discussed the current situation, and analyzed possible steps going forward. There are many challenges ahead for Turkey and Greece. One critical dispute is concerning energy exploration rights in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. While Ankara wants to discuss a range of issues, including the demilitarization of some Greek islands, Athens is only willing to talk on matters of demarcation of maritime boundaries.
The importance of these talks really is more in what they prevent than what they're likely to produce. The hope is they'll lead to a decline in tensions and prevent what we saw last year, some very high tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean, leading to a military clash. So I think that's the most we can hope for these talks, is that they will reduce the risk of a full confrontation between Greece and Turkey.
Political analyst Gareth Jenkins also stresses that Turkey has a strong motivation for the resumption of talks.
The urgency for Turkey to agree to the talks now is because you have a new administration in the White House, which is going to be less friendly towards Turkey than the old one. And the EU at the moment is in the a process of putting together a new package of sanctions, which is likely to be agreed at the end of March.
Greece recently announced it would extend its western territorial waters to 12 nautical miles. However, Ankara has repeatedly warned that a similar intention in the Aegean Sea would be considered a cause for war for Turkey. So many challenges ahead for the next round of talks planned to take place in Athens. I'm Michal Bardavit for CGTN in Istanbul.
Let's go to the U.S., where lawmakers from the House of Representatives have delivered an article of impeachment against Donald Trump. It sets in motion what could result in the conviction of the former president. Earlier, we spoke to our correspondent Jagruti Davi in Washington, D.C. about the procedure.
9 House impeachment managers did the ceremonial procession walking across the US Capitol from the House to the Senate to deliver that single article of impeachment to the Senate, which would normally kickstart the Senate trial. However, the Majority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell have agreed on a start date of the week starting February the 8th. And this is to give the Senate time to concentrate on US President Joe Biden's agenda, on confirming members of his cabinet. Also, it gives Donald Trump time to assemble his defense team. Now, it's quite unlikely, it seems at this point, that the Senate will convict Donald Trump in this trial. Remember, it's a historic moment. It's the first time in American history that a president has been impeached twice. There's a growing number of Republicans, however, who are questioning both the legitimacy of a Senate trial, but also the case against the president. Joe Biden made his first extensive comments about the trial, telling CNN that it has to happen. But I think, there's a sense amongst some people that maybe some momentum in the immediate aftermath of the riot on January the 6th may have lost in the delay to start the impeachment trial at the beginning of February.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Africa receives $38 billion worth of foreign direct investments in 2020. And South Sudan takes steps to reduce pollution caused by oil production.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa has recorded a total foreign direct investment of $38 billion in 2020. That's a drop of 18% from $46 billion that was recorded in 2019. Although it was a staggering 38% decrease, Egypt remains a top investment destination on the continent. It has secured the highest influx of FDI with a total inflow of $5.5 billion. Data from the United Nations Trade Association further shows that Nigeria attracted $2.6 billion in 2020, down from the $3.3 billion it received last year. South Africa, a major competitor for FDI inflows in sub-Saharan Africa, attracted $2.5 billion, down from $4.6 billion it secured in 2019. Let's look further into Egypt investments now. The country has also topped the list of beneficiaries from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development for a third year in a row. The London-based financial institution has invested over $8.4 billion in more than 125 projects in the country since 2015. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with more details.
The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has announced that Egypt attracted the most investments from the bank in 2020. The North African state received nearly half of the budget allocated to the whole southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. Data shows Egypt accounted for more than €1 billion out of the $2.13 billion of development financing injected into 48 projects across the region.
Egypt is a very fertile land for investments at the moment. It has strong human resources and labor force. It has abundant natural resources. The steps Egypt is taking for economic reforms has been unique and has been reflected in the economic growth rates. The bank works on projects in water waste, fintech, solar energy and agricultural projects, as well as the largest solar energy firm, which is in Aswan, in partnership with the private and public sectors together.
The private sector has received a 58% share of the bank's annual support. With uncertainty still looming large on the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and related economic downturn, the EBRD has more plans in the pipeline.
Despite the outbreak of the coronavirus, investments did not stop. In fact, they actually increased. The European Bank provided loans to Bank of Misr and the National Bank of Egypt to finance small and medium enterprises to survive the tough conditions resulting from the pandemic. Also, a new approach in Egypt is being implemented to focus on environmentally friendly projects, green projects, clean energy, and clean transportation.
The latest deal struck this week is to support the ailing tourism sector that is reeling from the fallout caused by the coronavirus. Along with government support, a series of training programs, funds, and consultancy for tourism entities are being put in place to keep the industry afloat. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
South Sudan's government says it's in the final stages of beginning a comprehensive environmental audit of its oil-producing regions. The country's petroleum ministry says the aim is to try and reduce pollution resulting from oil production. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Years of oil production amid civil war have harmed the environment in South Sudan, according to the country's petroleum ministry. The ministry says it has selected 11 international environmental audit firms to carry out assessment in the oil fields. The companies are still going through the bidding process.
The basic reason is to make sure we adhere to international best practices and standards set. And we are making this a public matter because it is already a public concern.
There are reported cases of birth defects and miscarriages among residents in the oil-producing regions in the country. Oil sales bring in 98% of all the revenue of South Sudan as it struggles to rebuild an economy shattered by years of civil war. But experts warn that the petroleum sector is causing a loss of grazing land and soil and water is getting contaminated. South Sudan's government says it plans to have a company to manage waste resulting from oil production.
Water is what is causing the bulk of the burden on the environment, and this is what we are focusing on. The solid waste also are there, but compared to water, of course, is little compared to water. So at the moment, we have very good plans for us to manage the waste, whether they are solid or liquid or even gaseous waste.
South Sudan's petroleum ministry says it wants to conclude the environmental audit, then offer 14 new oil blocks for exploration with proper guidelines on waste management. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
The UK is aiming to go carbon neutral by 2050 and, as Kitty Logan finds out, it's banking on clean energy, including offshore wind farms. Take a look.
It's the future of energy generation. Hornsea 1 is currently the world's biggest offshore wind farm. Giant wind turbines planted in the sea off the northeast coast of England. And next to this will soon be Hornsea 2, even bigger.
It's a completely green energy source, so with no costs to generate.
It's 1.4 gigawatts of power. Now, that's enough for 1.3 million homes.
The British offshore wind power industry has taken off in recent years. Shallow waters and high winds create ideal conditions for an energy source helping combat climate change.
You essentially take wind, which has absolutely zero carbon, you turn that into electricity, capturing it in the sea, and then return it to land in a very environmentally friendly way.
UK government subsidies are attracting investment in the sector too.
I think long-term, stable, clear policy has really helped for certainty for investors and also helped to bring those prices down. And that's allowed wind to sort of start taking the share that coal and natural gas were producing.
The government set an ambitious target to power all homes from wind by 2030. The National Grid says last year was already the greenest yet for the country's electricity system, with lowest ever levels of carbon emissions and record highs of wind power. Around 1,500 onshore wind farms also play a vital part.
Onshore wind farms are generally much cheaper and easier to establish, though far smaller. But even a few wind turbines like these can power several thousand local homes.
The ultimate aim is to replace dirty fossil fuels like gas to reach net zero emissions by 2050. That means changes in homes and to national infrastructure.
With wind and with more renewables, we'll need to see more storage, like battery storage. We'll need to see more flexibility allowed by the system. But once all of those things in place, I can't see any reason why renewables and wind in particular wouldn't just grow and grow.
Wind power is now cheaper to produce, creating lower bills for consumers. There's greater acceptance too of turbines on farmland, though conservationists warn of risks for birds and want turbines kept away from migrating flocks. But there is plenty of public support for projects like Hornsea 2, which boost local economies. And as construction of this huge wind farm moves ahead, the government's wind power goals are getting closer. Kitty Logan, CGTN.
The number of cryptocurrency users around the world continues to explode, as do the volatile prices. Although its value has recently dropped, Bitcoin has about tripled over the past year. And as CGTN's Mark New reports, digital assets are now finding their way into new markets.
From gas stations to supermarkets to garages, cryptocurrency machines are likely coming to a location near you. The company CoinCloud just installed its 1,400th kiosk that lets people from all walks of life buy and sell digital currencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and US dollar stablecoins.
Women over the age of 45, they are our #1 customer. That's what that demographic really appreciates, is the tangibility of the physical kiosk and the instant accessibility.
And this CoinCloud kiosk is located in a convenience store and a gas station here in Silicon Valley. You don't have to open up any type of brokerage account. All you have to do is follow a few instructions, scan my code, insert my money, and I bought Bitcoin within minutes.
So the big prediction for 2021 is that digital currency wallets are going to become native to any financial mobile app. So whether it's PayPal, the Facebook Libra project, the Cash App, it's inevitable. And the open nature of cryptocurrencies and the ability to send money anywhere in the world, not limited to banks.
No limitations mean cryptocurrencies are finding their way into new markets like digital art. Artist Jeff Emanuel founded the Pastel Network, which created its own cryptocurrency powered by blockchain technology. The network allows artists to securely sell their network to collectors, bypassing the gatekeepers of the industry, like dealers, agents, and galleries.
Any artist can create an original digital artwork, register it on the system, say how many copies of it exist, and sell it, list it for sale in Pastel coins. And then people, collectors, fans of the artist can purchase these rare copies and then hold on to them, and hopefully they'll appreciate and value, or they can turn around and resell them.
Other markets being transformed by blockchain technology include the world of sport. Socios.com has just partnered with football team AC Milan to launch the AC Milan token, a crypto asset for fans.
What you buy is a share of influence, and that's actually where the blockchain technology becomes interesting, because you get a piece of the rights to vote on some basic decisions for the clubs that are related to the music in the stadium, the color in the jersey, and everything that is fan related.
Prices for the tokens fluctuate depending on the market. Socios.com has already launched crypto assets for football clubs like FC Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, and Juventus. It's also working on a similar project with mixed martial arts organization UFC.
Before COVID, these guys used to make millions of dollars of people going in a stadium, and suddenly they don't come anymore. And these people in the stadium, they represent less than 1% of their fan base, but they were representing a significant amount of revenue. Now that this revenue is zero, they start to focus on the 99% of the people that were not coming to the stadium.
Socios.com says in 2020, their digital tokens generated $30 million, most of which went directly to the sport teams. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Straight ahead. Thousands of children in Kenya failed to return to school following a 9-month closure.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Many schools in Kenya, which recently reopened their doors after months of closure due to COVID-19 pandemic, have now reported a rise in cases of absenteeism. Some of those are linked to early pregnancies. That has left many parents and teachers worried. CGTN's Nick Mudimba visited a school in Kitui County and reports on the situation there.
At Makweni Primary School in Kenya's Kitui County, classes are going on. The pupils are adjusting to the new normal. Teachers are on their part, trying their best to ensure the syllabus is properly covered, given the time they lost to the pandemic. But there's a problem. Many pupils are yet to report back to the school.
You know, we are employed, and that we have to come to school. It is our duty to be in school, so we make sure we are in school. So the issue that is there is maybe the pupils not coming, but the teachers report to work, they do their work. But the issue is, you know, the morale may not be there. When you go to class, you find that almost half of the pupils are not in school. So, but you teach the pupils who are already in school.
From a distance, we notice a middle-aged woman walking towards the school carrying a baby on her back. But that's her grandchild. She has brought the baby for breastfeeding because the mother is a 15-year-old in her final year at this primary school. The mother is trying her best to keep her daughter in school.
I was surprised when I learned that she is pregnant because she's still in school and I want her to continue with her education. But when I saw her pregnant, I was so dejected and surprised.
I want to study and be a doctor. My dream is to reach the university and pursue medicine.
She sits and watches her daughter finish breastfeeding her baby under a tree. The schoolgirl turned young mother then heads back to class, leaving her own mother to walk back home with her young one. The baby's grandmother is hopeful that one day fortunes will change for her daughter, who despite all the challenges she faces is trying to stay in school where many haven't returned.
If we look at the daily attendance, which we take on a daily basis, so we find that there are some pupils, they come today, tomorrow you don't get them.
We visit another pupil at her home. She's from the same school and hasn't been back there since the institution reopened. She's 3 months pregnant, but is too embarrassed to go back to school.
After I deliver, I will leave the baby with my mother so that I can go and sit for my final examination.
She carries on with her daily house chores, but she still has hopes of finishing her education, given that her classmates who have delivered children have since resumed learning. 10 months or more out of school, and right now the responsibility of the students and the pupils is all about catching up. Discipline and the consistency is a recipe they need to make sure they also finish the syllabus before the national exams that is coming up soon. So far, for those not in school, the Ministry of Education is trying to bridge the gap, mitigate in ways they can actually get back to the classrooms. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Kitui County, Kenya.
In Libya, amateur drivers are using old cars in the coastal city of Misrata to perform high-speed drifting as a form of entertainment. The hobby has become a refuge for many young Libyan men wishing to escape the reality of the country's decade-long conflict. Let's take a look.
This driving technique is identified as drifting. It's where the driver intentionally oversteers with loss of traction while maintaining control and driving the car through the entirety of a corner. And for dozens of young Libyans, this has become a weekly affair.
The war happened and everything happened. All these young men want is to unwind and get together and enjoy themselves. The sport is not wrong, but something they can use to have fun. They want to gather and watch. This is a social event. We have drifters and mechanic teams.
It is a kind of change of pace, leisure and a way to pass time so we forget about the war and the misery. So we forget everything that is happening in our country. We hope the state will look at its youth and find a place for them to practice their hobbies so they can unwind.
There is no other hobby here. There is nothing else in Misrata. There is no space for the youth. Nothing. Zero. This hobby is how we breathe.
The sport does not involve competition, only a display of drifting skills. Participants are usually between the ages of 18 and 40, each driver drifting with their own cars. Chao Mogono, CGTN.
And coming up in sports. Mali through to the knockout stages of the African Nations Championship that is currently ongoing in Cameroon.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Eagles of Mali beat Zimbabwe